Hi everybody, welcome back to another video. It's Sunday here today. I want to do a quick Q&A video on the last video where we were stockpiling beet pulp. We've got this one pile closed up now all the way, covered in tires. We started a second one here beginning of last week. Beginning of this week, I suppose it was. We've got it covered up to here, and then we'll open this back up here tomorrow morning when they start bringing in some more loads to us. For a few questions that I want to talk about, one of you had asked what kind of byproducts are available to us and why we feed some of those byproducts. So I have a video out here a few weeks back where I went through some of our feeds that we're feeding. Maybe in the future I'll do another video and talk about each ingredient a little bit more in depth. But beet pulp, we have quite a few plants close to us here, and it makes for pretty good feed. It's highly digestible, still has some sugar left in there after they extract the sugar. So it makes good feed for us when it's available. Typically it's available to us fresh from about the end of August, September until sometime in April. Maybe early May, but typically at the end of when things start to warm up in spring, the pulp's not as good of quality because the beets that they're processing aren't as good of quality anymore. So that was part of the reason why we wanted to stockpile some here. We like to feed beet pulp if we can, but obviously through the summer when they're not processing beets, we're not able to get fresh beet pulp. If you want to go back to that video and look at some of our other feeds, you're more than welcome to do that, and I'll probably have some more videos on our feeds in the future, maybe talk about them a little more in depth. Like I said, there was also a question about price, what we're paying for the pulp. So the fresh wet beet pulp at the beginning of the season when they start processing, it's free. You just have to pay for trucking to get it hauled out. And then later on the season, like now, I think we're paying about $10 a ton for that, and then we have to pay for trucking. The dry pulp, not sure what the dry pulp itself is worth. I'd actually contacted another trucking company that had done some wet beet pulp hauling for us here a few years back to see if they'd want to haul some wet loads, and they really hadn't had a lot of luck getting wet loads of pulps, but he had mentioned they had some dry available, so we have that coming in for $110 per ton delivered. And he's able to, I was surprised how much he can get on his trailer. He's hauling about 24-25 ton in that walking floor trailer. So that worked out pretty good to get a few loads of that in together with the wet pulp and kind of blending it off in the pile here. Trying to keep it as consistent as we can, but we'll probably test it quite often as we're feeding through these piles to make sure that the dry matter that's in our feeding computer is accurate to what we're actually feeding. Another question was asked about how we feed this pulp, or how it fits in our ration. So we feed a pretty low rate, typically about 15 pounds per cow per day, and that's ass fed, so that's wet pounds. So what we would normally do is take the same amount of dry matter pounds of silage out and replace it with the same amount of dry matter pounds of beet pulp and put that in to replace. So it's basically a 1-to-1 change on a dry matter basis, if that makes sense to you guys. If we were to feed a higher rate, maybe we would have to adjust the ration some more, but because we're feeding quite a low rate compared to the rate of silage that we're feeding, that's how we make the change in our ration when we are feeding beet pulp when it is available to us. The other question or point that I wanted to talk about was how we're storing the pulp here. So I had mentioned that I'd maybe like to try putting the wet pulp in an ag bag at some point to see, how that would work for us. And when I said that, I was really talking about just wet pulp because it's difficult to pack. We've done it before in the past, packed wet pulp alone, but you really have to be careful when you're doing that, because if you drive over the pile too much, all of a sudden you sink in and then you have a mess, and at that point it becomes pretty difficult to make a nice pile. But with this dry pulp that we've been able to get here, to mix in with the wet, that's made it quite easy to pack this pile and to keep it nice and packed. I really would prefer to feed out of a pile over an ag bag, because ag bags can be quite messy, and especially the amount of pounds that we're feeding, you'd be cutting back the plastic constantly and trying not to pick up plastic off the bottom and get it in your mixer. It could be an easy way to store wet pulp because you don't have to worry about packing it and trying to keep a nice shaped pile. But with this dry pulp, well, you can see the piles that we're making here. This is a pretty nice pile, and same with this one. It turned out pretty good, I feel. And we'll feed through this at a rate that we shouldn't have any spoilage on the front of the pile. At least I wouldn't expect there to be. And we'll kind of watch it as we start feeding it, and as the temperatures get hot in the summer here. If we do think that we're starting to get some spoilage on the front of the pile, we'll just feed it at a faster rate. I'd like to make these piles last until the next beet processing season, but if we have to feed through it a little bit faster to make sure that we're not putting spoiled feed in the mix, then we'll do that, and then we'll just take it out once the pulp is finished. That's not the end of the world. I would rather feed it up and have good quality pulp rather than feed it slowly and have a little bit of spoilage on the front that we're feeding to our cows, or that we're taking off and putting on our manure pile. Those were the couple things that I wanted to talk about here. If you have any more questions, I'll try to answer them in the comments. Thought I could show you this quick. So when we harvested our earlage last fall, I had commented to you guys that we had some corn that was laying down that they couldn't pick up with the chopper. So we made earlage out of it. And that's kind of this middle layer here. It almost looks more like shredlage or silage than it does earlage. And that was just because when they were going through it with their corn head, it was pulling in a lot of the leaves, a lot of the plant material. It wasn't ripping the cobs off like it should. We're feeding a little bit of this to our milking cows, and then we're feeding it to our calves and heifers in replacement of the earlage and those rations. We have a good amount left here, but I think in the next couple months we should be finished with that pile. It definitely is better in the pile than it is laying out in the field, so I'm glad we were able to get it off. But just makes it a little bit more challenging to feed that. We have to watch it a little bit closer when we're going through that pile as that layer in the pile changes as we're going through it, I guess, if that makes sense. But yeah, thought I'd show you guys that quick, and hopefully we'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.